This is 99% useless. I'm not Roman Mars. I'm Stephen Lemontree. The night of the 4th of March 2017, Stephen finally uploads the first episode of a podcast he's been thinking about launching since November of the previous year. Yeah, I uploaded it the night before, ready for it to go live the following day. It'd been ready for like a little while, as I'd made it before I finished the episode that came after it. This episode, much like the first episode in this current series you're listening to, doesn't really say much. It's more of a placeholder episode, a trailer, if you will, for the podcast series that will follow. Yeah, I worked really, really hard on the first proper episode, the countdown. It came out really well in the end, I thought, like in terms of vision to execution, it, lines up pretty well. It's all a bit better, of course. Even the beginning of the podcast is about failure. But if I could go back and change stuff, I mean, yeah, I would. But it'd just be, tidying stuff up, fixing levels, changing the way I do some of the voiceover, stuff like that. Nothing too major. So after such a promising start, where he managed to execute his quote-unquote vision, where did it all go wrong for Stephen? Was it, as many have speculated, in the initial design of the project? Maybe it is in the design. I've never really been great at planning things out in too much detail. When I do, I get lost in that detail, and nothing's ever really released. So you go in with the bare bones of a plan, vague ideas, and one of those ideas was this American Life, US public radio, journalism style, like meta piece about launching the podcast. And, maybe if I could keep it up, continue in that style as the podcast progressed. But it's hard. That's a lot of work. And I didn't really think my life had enough, hashtag content to keep up that kind of production rate anyway. So almost from the very beginning, it seems that the project was doomed to fail. Setting up a one-man band, highly structured and edited podcast about the creation of the podcast and the life of its creator never had much legs in terms of content or the ability for it to be produced. I mean, yeah, when you look at it, the podcast was going to be useless to 99% of people who came across it. I mean, unless you literally knew me personally and were invested in me creating a podcast, like who's gonna listen or enjoy it, At the time, there were other podcasts that Stephen got inspiration from that made him think it could work. The Millennial podcast by Megan Tan, for instance. Yeah, Millennial was definitely an influence, and made me think like people might be interested. They helped me to understand how to craft a show in that sort of style. But my life was nowhere near as exciting as Megan's was. And the UK doesn't have the kind of podcast, radio sort of infrastructure that the US does, So what's going to be different this time? Stephen is making another podcast series. He's even committed to it being weekly, all year. 52 episodes. Isn't that going to be even harder than the podcast series he was making before, where there were no deadlines? I think it will absolutely be harder, but it'll be easier as well, As I say in the countdown, I feel like I need deadlines to be able to function. So maybe the weekly deadline will work for me, As soon as I break the streak, I'll lose motivation, like almost certainly. But as long as I can keep it going, I feel it might work. But what sorts of things can we expect from him in this new podcast series? I think that's ultimately the beauty of it. It could be pretty much anything this time. Like, there will be repeating types of episodes, no doubt. But the theme this time is inherently experimental. Like, before the idea was set, it changed over time. But in each case, I felt limited to like a certain style. This time there are basically no rules. But many observers are wondering whether Stephen has the ability to maintain this kind of output across the year. I mean, it will be hard. I'm not denying that, and I'm almost expecting to fail. But I'm going to try really hard not to. The first step is getting the first one up, and if you're hearing this, then that has certainly happened. Then the next goal is to get to the first month, and then make it to 10 episodes. Then making 13. 13 because that's an unlucky number. But that'll be one more than the previous series. So anything after that is a win. as far as I'm concerned. I mean, do you have any tips for me, not Roman, about podcasting? Yeah, about podcasting and keeping it consistent. I mean, you've done this show for years now. I have a couple. Yeah. Find your favourite piece of tape and get to it as fast as you can. Fall in love with your subject's voice. Do at least one thing that makes you laugh or really pleases you in the piece. Find all the places for joy that you can. Edit, and then edit again. And get really, really close to the mic. Thank you, not Roman. Not at all. Here, in its original format, is the countdown. Originally released on the 15th of March, 2017. Enjoy.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Do you find that those early few seconds of the new year, just after the clock strikes 12, are filled
Happy New Year, guys!
with such happiness and hope for the new year? They always feel so full of so much promise, yet the promise is so easily squandered. But for those few seconds, you feel like you can accomplish anything. I started out with good intentions for the year. Honestly. I really did.
Hello. It is the 1st of January, 2017. Currently sat on a sofa in Baker and Ari's house. I was going to their gig last night. Saw the first entry in my audio journal, I think is what we're going to call it. I'll make stuff this year, so that's sort of the ethos behind the year, is create things, because I feel for definitely the past year, in terms of what I've created, it's been very, very little, very low creative output. Haven't really played guitar very much, haven't really written very much, haven't really created YouTube videos or anything like that. 2016 is definitely the year of being a massive consumer of content, definitely. Content at all times: films, books, music, podcasts, movies, wrestling, video games. Maybe less on the video games. Didn't really play that many in 2016. But 17, hopefully, be the year of creating things. And that sort of starts with this podcast / audio recording of my life. Yeah, onwards and upwards.
Ah, listen to me there. So young and full of hope. Little did I know then that I would achieve functionally nothing in the month of January. Such is the nature of New Year's resolutions, or trying to make any significant change in January. You think that just because it's January and you want to make a change, that should be enough. Without the structure and systems in place to guide you to do the right thing, you just end up wheels spinning and staying exactly where you are. I find that being around creative people, in any capacity at all, really makes me want to be more creative myself. And so this New Year spent in the company of creative people, listening to my friends play music all night long certainly should have spurred me into being more creative in 2017. That might have worked for perhaps the first 3 days or so, but once I was back to work, most of my time and energy was spent there, leaving me very little left over to motivate myself to continue my passion projects on the side. It wasn't all work in January though. I took myself off to Japan for some of it. A chance to relax, see some of the magnificent sights, and generally think about my life a bit more. Think about what I wanted to get out of it. Did I really want to make things? Or was that just a lie I told myself? Hello. So it's like really early in the morning, because I'm suffering a lot from jet lag. I never thought I would, but I'm waking up at like seemingly 4 o'clock in the morning, and not being able to get back to sleep and falling asleep at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's all a bit chaotic, really. However, I saw the Tokyo Skytree. Went up the Tokyo Skytree. That was incredible. Got to see Mount Fuji from there, man. Mount Fuji in all its glory, its religious splendour, almost. It looks incredible. I mean, no amount of photos that you can ever take, regardless of like how good the camera how good my camera is anyway, is ever going to capture like the image of it. And like when you got this lift to the top, and the lift doors open, and then you step out, and it's like right there in front of you in the distance, and it's difficult to put into words. I've done other things while I've been here. When I watched the wrestling, that was really fun. New Japan Pro Wrestling in Korakuen Hall. Sat next to some very, very passionate fans, and yeah, it was good. It was good stuff. I've really enjoyed myself. The temple's always good to go and see. The calm serenity of it all, and contrasting that with the busy, bustling Tokyo city itself. It's interesting. It's good. I've really enjoyed myself. And travelling by yourself, that's a new and exciting experience. Terrifying in one aspect, but also something that suits me. Right down to the ground. That independence and willingness to be completely alone, and being content with myself and my loneliness, if you will. Not to get all sappy, but I've had a really good time in Japan. I'm going back tomorrow, but I've got like almost a full day of it ahead of me, so I'm gonna leave the bags with the concierge and go out and see some more temples, and maybe go back to Akihabara, go in some of the shops around there a bit. Need to go to a maid cafe. Haven't done that yet. That's on the agenda. Hopefully there's definitely ones in Akihabara, so that's what we'll do tomorrow. But yeah, it's been a really good trip. So that was my January in a nutshell. Little of note was achieved in my creative sphere, which frustrated me and frustrates me no end once the calendar ticked over to February. But why did it bother me so much? In reality, not much had really changed. One day had passed since the previous day, but that happens all the time. What was the difference now? It was at this point that I realised how tied I am to seemingly arbitrary deadlines. I'm so fixated on the countdown to the end of the month and the significant passing of time that it symbolises. This is why I was so fixated on the new year, and why I captured it on tape. I am fixated by countdowns. And so that is what I need to motivate myself. To embark on these consistently failing creative projects appeared to be deadlines. It's almost strange it took me that long to work out, but there we go. What I did realise on my trip to Japan was the fact that the largest countdown looming over me was the end of my life, and indeed all life on this planet. So I have been reading this book while I've been away here in Japan, called Some by David Eagleman. It's a really, really small book. It's like a collection of 40 or so really short stories, but they're all stories about the afterlife and like different interpretations of it. It's not really a religious book by any stretch of the imagination. Definitely not religious, but it does talk about gods and afterlives and stuff, and just getting you to think a lot about like the fact that I'm gonna die, which I know I should know, and like I do know, but reading like an entire book dedicated to it really puts it at the front of your mind. Not that I don't think about death a lot. I can't think about it in the abstract. Less about my death, more about the universe's death, I guess. So having it recentered to focus more on my own personal demise was interesting. And it makes you think about, different ways to live your life and how your life is, what am I trying to say? Like the first sort of story in the list is called Some. That's where you live your life in batches of related experiences. So, you sleep all at once. You do all your looking into the fridge at once. You do all of your waiting in lines at once, And in that story, you sort of realise how much time you spend doing really random and insignificant things. Also how much you sleep. I mean, good lord. Yeah, just sort of reassesses, like, do I need to, scroll on Twitter some more? Maybe not. If I counted up all the times I spend on Twitter and then had to live them back to back to back to back to back, would I continue to do it? It's not preaching in any way, like the book. It's just sort of, positing ideas and saying, what if this happened? What if this happened? And sort of leaves it up to your interpretation. But yeah, really got me thinking that I should just do the things that I want to do. Yeah. I want other people to read that book. I want people to talk that book with, Yeah. That's all I've got for now. Catch you later. So yes, it took me going to Japan and reading a book for me to realise that one day soon, I am going to die. And so whatever I want to do, I'd better just do it, because time is running out. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm making a podcast. I'm making a thing. I'm putting it out into the world. Let's hope I can continue to do this. Let's hope. Memento Mori. You've been listening to Polaris, a podcast about finding your way in the world. The acoustic music included throughout this podcast was performed by Arita Hanzadeh on vocals and Alex Baker on acoustic guitar. Links to their social media can be found in the show notes for this episode at polorispodcast.com. That's PELORUS podcast.com, and on Twitter at polorispod. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at nevetslt. That's NEVETSLEH. I'm Stephen Lehman. Thanks for listening.
This episode was written and produced by me, Stephen Lemontree. Our outro music is Simplicity by Macroform Music. If you ever want to contact us, you can do so on Instagram and Twitter at nevetslt, that's NEVETSLT, or email nevetslt@gmail.com. Life is a jam jar full of handwritten notes. We'll see you next week.